Welcome to the Full-Time Life podcast. I'm Steph. Full-time life stands for the notion that the concept of work-life balance is flawed. There's no such thing as work separate and apart from life. It's all just life. And it's up to each of us to create our own perfect formula, our own balance ratio, so that we feel like we're living a full-time life. This is a solo episode, solo one of many, where I'd like to share my experience on what I like to call 21 days of confidence and show you the building blocks and encourage you to create your own experiment of committing to something for 21 days at a time and see where it leads you. 11 years ago, I sat down on my yoga mat. I wasn't a big yogi at the time, but it was New Year's Day. It felt like the right thing to do. And the yoga instructor encouraged us at the beginning of class to set an intention for our year. And boy, did I. I set an intention to be the best version of me. And even though I didn't know exactly what that looked like at the time, I set in motion a program, a series, a framework for myself that ultimately resulted in me being the best version of me at that time. And I wanted to share a little bit about that process here and encourage you to consider your own 21 days of confidence and what that might look like for you. So I left that yoga class not entirely sure what the best version of me entailed, but what I suspected is that I could make small tweaks across many different areas of my life, across my fitness, nutrition, finances, relationships, professional career, and that if I could make small tweaks in all of those areas, I would begin to make my way to the best version of me. And what that looked like at the time is that every 21 days, I was going to commit to some habit to do for 21 days, and that's it. And every 21 days, I would come up with a new habit. I didn't really know exactly how it would unfold, but when I tell you that year ended up being so magical for me, I wrote a blog at the time, and it's really amazing to even go back and see how it all unfolded. I've recreated some of it on Substack if you're interested in learning more specifically about that 21 days of yoga. I'm gonna start with my first yoga post of the year. January 2nd, 2013. Yesterday, I kicked off 2013 with a yoga class where the instructor asked us to set an intention for the year. And right there on the mat, I set my intention for 2013 to be the best me, without comparison or competition with anyone around me, and pursuing the things that I think make me stronger, kinder, smarter, healthier, more financially responsible, happier, and more compassionate. I'd be the first one to admit that I have a lot of areas for improvement, and maybe it goes without saying that we are always working toward being the best version of ourselves, but this year I want to have a more focused effort toward it. And to that end, I have decided to commit to a 21-day goal over and over again for 365 days, a different goal every 21 days for a year. 21 days is just long enough to be challenging, just short enough to be attainable, and I think just enough time to maybe form some healthy habits. In my experience, one healthy habit usually begets another. And I'm not even sure it's habits I'm after so much as the accomplishment of small things and the elimination of excuses, that it's too late, too early, too cold, too hot. I'm too tired, I'm too busy, there's too many good opportunities to socialize, it's too expensive, too anything. And for my first 21 days, since I got yesterday off to a good start with it, and I have an all-day yoga seminar later this month, I'm committing to 21 days of yoga. I started with 21 days of yoga. And the reason why I chose yoga, one, because I had already done that yoga class on January 1st, so I could already check the box of 1 day complete. And also I had a weekend of yoga coming up later that month. It wasn't something that I necessarily sought out, but one of my besties at the time was coming into the city. I lived in New York. She had signed up for this yoga weekend, asked me to do it with her. I said, absolutely. And I figured that at least by doing yoga every day, I'd be training in a way for this weekend of yoga with one of my really good friends. And so that was where it started with what am I going to commit to for 21 days. And that is the beginning of your own, where do I begin? I would start with deciding on something that is easy to say yes to, and that is just a small tweak to your already existing routine. My mindset is that you never need a total overhaul, but small tweaks and small changes can compound over time to really create very transformative results, and that's what we're going through here. So when you're choosing your what's really important is that you choose something that makes sense for you at the time. So that may take a little bit of looking at the calendar, what's on the radar, what's coming up, is there something you need to prep for or train for? Is there a big purchase you're trying to make? Maybe it becomes a financial habit. Is there some race that you're trying to do, then it becomes a fitness habit? Is there some big milestone in your career that's coming up? Maybe it's a career habit. But start with where you are and a little situational awareness for what may be the small tweak that makes sense for you right now. And once you've done that, you'll want to define the minimum viable dose. That is going to be custom to you. So I decided at the time of my 21 days of yoga that 20 minutes of yoga was my minimum viable dose. And that 20 minutes of yoga could be done in a studio, could be done at home, could be a home practice. If I was on my yoga mat for 20 minutes, I was doing yoga. And that is what you want to define up front. You want to go ahead and set the parameters around what is going to suffice, what is going to be a checkbox for you in terms of what you want to commit to. And that's really up to you. You would want to go ahead and define what constitutes on a day when you're stretched thin, when you don't have a lot of resources or you're too busy, what is going to be the minimum viable dose on that day? And then ultimately, you're always trying to do your best each day, but you at least have that kind of default mode. If nothing else, I did 20 minutes of yoga in my living room. And that's where we begin. And I just wanted to start with that first building block. There's 5 building blocks ultimately that come in over time. It is this defining the thing that you're going to do and that minimum viable dose. There is an aspect of taking a look at the calendar and identifying all of your excuses ahead of time and going ahead and planning for that. There's an element of naming all of your resources and identifying what your resources will be throughout the 21 days. So whether you join a yoga studio, find a yoga podcast, in my example of yoga. There's also an aspect of consuming content related to the thing that you're trying to do. That could look something like consuming podcasts related to the thing you're going to do, finding a book that is related to the thing that you want to do, following influencers. There's a lot of different ways that you can consume content related to that thing. It's a really important component because it gives you an education on the thing that you're trying to do beyond just the action you're taking. And then the final component is accountability. And I want to break each of these down in these short little mini solo podcast episodes to give you an idea of how you may want to get started. For this one, it is, what do you want to commit to for 21 days, and what is the minimum viable dose of that thing that you're going to commit to? And then you just begin. And that's the best part. No preparation required. Just begin right where you are. Start today. Build on to your little toolkit as you go along. You're in it for 21 days, so you've got lots of opportunity to build into your toolkit. And I hope this gives you a little bit of inspiration. If there's something that you're wanting to commit to do, that you can begin today, and you can have the tools and resources and support through this podcast to continue to build on. I want to tell you what this is not. This is not 75 Hard. When 75 Hard came out, I was very curious. I was like, oh, this is kind of a similar vein to what I do on a regular basis, except it has the word hard in it, which already is like a mental negative loop in your head, where if you wake up every day, you're like, this is going to be hard. One year, I deep dived into what 75 Hard looked like and was curious about how it compared to what I already know and do. I think that there are probably people that have transformed their lives through 75 Hard, so no shade to that entire program, but it is not my vibe in any way, shape, or form. The main components that I took issue with that don't align with the way that I get things done is one was calling it hard. So in mine, I call it 21 Days of Confidence, because it really is. It is so amazing when you make a commitment to yourself that I'd like to do this thing for 21 days. And then you honor that commitment for 21 days. You're building this trust muscle in yourself that I can stick to the things that I say I'm going to do for myself. You're actually doing things that you think are going to be small tweaks that are going to get you to the next level or some sort of up level. And so that 21 days of committing to yourself builds a tremendous amount of confidence in yourself and your power to own what you can control in your own world and your own full-time life. So one is just the naming convention. I think if you're getting up every morning and your immediate thing is something this hard, then you're just setting yourself up for this idea of a challenge. The second thing is, it was an all or nothing approach that when I did consume podcasts of people that were doing it, I found that once they fell off the wagon of the 75 days, they fell hard. In my 21 days of confidence, there is a little bit of ease and grace to it overall and ultimately. I ran a 21-day experiment every 21 days for a year. And over the course of that year, I committed to not taking taxis. I lived in New York at the time, and that was for my financial optimization. I committed to not being late, to being on time everywhere. I committed to running every single day. I committed to yoga. I committed to some nutrition goals. And throughout those 21 days, most of the time I hit my 21 days. Some days I didn't. Some days I had a day or two where I did not do the thing I said I was going to do. What I did instead, what you must do instead if you're going to miss a day, is you need to stop and reflect. Why? Why did I miss a day? How can I fix this going forward? Do I still even want to commit to this? Hopefully you do. That builds a little bit of grit if you can commit to something for 21 days. But at least taking a little reflection for what went wrong and what you would do differently, then you get back on the saddle and you don't begin again at the beginning. You just begin again in this process of your 21 days. And what I found in that year is that little bit of reflection and grace and doubling down on my commitment to the 21 days goes a long way versus you fell off the wagon and you have to start all the way back at the beginning. The other thing that I took issue with that program was that you were building a lot of habits all at once. And I remember tweaking it for myself because I wanted to make sure I had a meditation practice and there were other things I wanted to build in. But ultimately, it becomes this like huge change all at once, which is really hard for us to do. And human behavior science suggests that we're really only capable of sustaining about 2% change at a time. Certainly there'll be life events that require us to have a massive change all at once. But just in terms of building habits, we're talking about 2% change. And what I found took issue with 75 Hard for me personally is it was too much change at once. It's like a total like overhaul of my life versus like, how about if I just start committing to yoga for 20 minutes a day? And what that allows you to do is then every 21 days to assess, do I want to keep this habit? You've done it long enough that you can figure out if it fits in your life. Maybe you take in a little bit of ease on the other side. It had a huge impact in my life. That first 21 days was really important for establishing the habit. Beyond the 21 days, I stuck with the habit. I ended up having a really regular yoga practice, going on my first yoga retreat, signing up a year later for a yoga teacher training, but it was something that really fit nicely into my life. And then I could move on to the next thing, and whatever that next thing was, I think at the time it was probably running, but we've got all the time in the world. You've got this 21 days and then the 21 days after that. And when you think of it as more of a long game, you can really have major transformation and habit change over time versus 75 Hard. And then when you're done, you're kind of like exhausted from the effort. The other thing that I learned when I read the Atomic Habits book by James Clear, it validated a lot that I already knew by my own experience. This idea of small change, this idea of habit stacking. There's so many concepts within that book that when I read it years later, I was like, this makes so much sense. And so I'll weave a little bit of the content from Atomic Habits in this little mini solo series as well. I hope this helps. I wanted to share a little inspo on what it might look like my first year of 21 Days of Confidence and starting out with yoga. How you begin. You begin by choosing the thing that you want to commit to for 21 days and identifying, defining your minimum viable dose. So I'm in a walking challenge right now. My minimum viable dose is 10,000 steps. Would I like to get more? Yes. Some days do I get more? Absolutely. But at the very least, I have to get that 10,000 steps. That's what a minimum viable dose looks like. Also, identifying the other components that you might want to think about that I'll deep dive in on future episodes. I think the transformation is way more than just doing something for 21 days. You're building your confidence in yourself and your trust muscle in yourself that you are going to do the things that you say that you're going to do for yourself more than anything else. I want to close out this episode by reading to you my last journal entry from that 21 days of yoga, just to give you an idea that it wasn't really about the yoga. It was about my commitment to myself and building that confidence again. 21 days, thoughts from the mat. Last night I went to 5 o'clock yoga, and this morning I went to a 7:15 class, and so my 21 days are complete. And in a small way, they might just be the most important 21 days of my year. You see, last year was this, and it's a photo of me at a finish line surrounded by my friends 9 months prior. Costa Rica. Most of that trip was amazing and unforgettable. The trip of a lifetime, really. I was so lucky to have so many of you there and at this precise moment cheering me on. But I'm pretty sure this picture was taken at just the moment I told you that I quit. And it's a photo of me running with the ocean in the background, with a smile on my face, but severely dehydrated, sunburned, and ready to tell my friends. I ran by you, was excited to see you, but I was physically done. I only even did a portion of the run so I could find you and tell you that I quit. That year, I was celebrating my birthday in Costa Rica. My friends were invited to come down, and I went early to do this race, and many of them planned their arrival so they could meet me at the finish line. So I just wanted to give you that little backstory. I ran by you, was excited to see you, but I was physically done. I only even did a portion of the run so I could find you and tell you that I quit. And it shouldn't have been a thing. None of you cared. No one thought lesser of me. No one ever mentioned being disappointed. From my closest friends and family, there was no judgment, just celebration. But I was really disappointed, and I've been carrying it around with me since then, like this big failure that it really didn't need to be. Still kind of catches me in my throat all these years later. I was signed up for several other long distance races that year, the New York Ironman, the Timberman Half Ironman, and the New York Marathon. But I stopped training and I didn't do any of them. Over $1,000 in race fees, but I couldn't pull myself up by the bootstraps and get back out there again. I was too weighed down by the failure to finish. I still did a few short distance runs here and there. My sister and I gutted through a half marathon in the Rockaways. I switched my Timberman Half Ironman to the shorter sprint distance, and Mom and I did it together. All was not lost, but I just kept carrying that failed finish around with me. And I think it's time to let it go. And so I have. I was hoping 21 days of committing to a single thing would help me get my mojo back, help me get some momentum for the year. Maybe. But I think mostly it just helped me let it go. And that feels amazing. So happy day 21. I blogged about it recently and I wrote, it wasn't about the yoga. The reason I started my yoga as my 21-day thing was because my friend was coming into town for an immersion weekend, and I agreed to join her even though I wasn't really a yogi at the time. And you know what? The event was underwhelming. The intention was best me. The goal was to prep for the yoga weekend, and the result, letting go of something I had been carrying around for 9 months. What? The mojo was definitely back. I share that primarily to share that it's never going to be about the thing that you're committing to do. So when you're thinking of the thing that you want to do that you think is going to be a small tweak to maybe your fitness, your nutrition, your finances, your career, your relationships, some aspect of your full-time life, start small. You're building the confidence in yourself that you are going to do the things that you say that you're going to do. And it is going to be transformative. What's small for one person is what might be big for another person. You have to decide that for yourself. I hope you enjoyed this solo episode. I will be sharing more in this solo episode space, specifically on the 21 days of confidence, with the encouragement to go commit to something for 21 days that you think is going to make your life better. Until next time. I hope you enjoyed this solo episode where I share a little bit of my journey in my own 21 days of confidence, a process that I still use to this day. And I've decided to start sharing about in case that it is inspiring or sparks an idea for you to do the same. I will include some links in my show notes in case you want to learn, read, hear more, and stay tuned for my next episode.